This is a professional building, not a daycare. The receptionist's voice echoed across the marble lobby of Cross Industries. Simone Keller's resume pages scattered like autumn leaves across the polished floor, her 6-year-old daughter Layla frozen beside her. She didn't see the man in the charcoal suit pause near the elevators, the same man who'd driven them here 20 minutes ago, the same man she'd thanked for the ride. Nathaniel Cross, CEO, stepped forward. "Actually, I'd like to hear what Miss Keller has to say." The morning that would change everything started 3 hours earlier, on a Tuesday in late September, in Simone's cramped studio apartment on the south side of Chicago. Sunlight barely penetrated the narrow window above the kitchen sink, but it was enough to illuminate the stack of bills on the counter. Past due, final notice, disconnect warning. She'd learned to sort them by severity rather than date. Layla sat at their small table, legs swinging, a purple crayon moving across paper with the focused intensity only a 6-year-old could muster. "Mama, look! I drew our new house." Simone turned from the coffee maker, forcing a smile. The drawing showed a square with a triangle roof, flowers in neat rows, 2 stick figures holding hands in front, one tall, one small, always just the 2 of them. "It's beautiful, baby. It has 3 bedrooms, one for you, one for me, and one for guests." Layla looked up, gap-toothed grin radiant. "That way Grandma can visit and not sleep on the couch." Simone's throat tightened. Her mother lived in Atlanta, couldn't afford to visit often, hadn't seen Layla in person for 14 months. Phone calls and video chats were poor substitutes for hugs. "That would be nice, wouldn't it?" She poured coffee into a chipped mug. Store-brand instant, the one small luxury she could afford, and let the bitter warmth steady her. Today was different. Today was Cross Industries, one of Chicago's largest privately held corporations, a diversified holding company with interests in real estate development, construction, and urban planning, known for community investment and employee benefits that sounded too good to be true. She'd applied for the executive assistant position in community outreach 3 weeks ago, certain the automated system would filter her out. Instead, 2 days later, an interview invitation arrived. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed the truth she tried to hide. Simone had inherited her mother's rich brown skin and expressive dark eyes, eyes that now had shadows beneath them despite concealer. Her natural hair, thick and coiled, was twisted into a practical bun because she couldn't afford a salon appointment, not that she'd trusted many stylists to handle it properly anyway. The blazer from Goodwill that fit well enough if she didn't raise her arms too high. She looked tired. She looked poor. She looked exactly like what the receptionist at Cross Industries would see. Someone who didn't belong. "We can do this," she whispered to her reflection. Her phone buzzed with an Uber notification. "Your driver has arrived. Black sedan, license plate, CRS 2024. Simone frowned slightly. The car was early. She'd scheduled pickup for 8:45, and it was only 8:38, but the plate matched, and she couldn't afford to waste time questioning luck. She grabbed Layla's hand, her worn tote bag, locked the door with fingers that trembled slightly. The black sedan waited at the curb, newer than most rideshares in this neighborhood. She opened the back door, apologizing before her body hit the seat. "I'm so sorry we're running late. Traffic on Lakeshore was a nightmare this morning." The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Mid-30s, dark hair, gray eyes that seemed to see more than they should, strong jaw with a day's worth of stubble, the kind of classically handsome features that probably made boardrooms both more and less intimidating. There was something weathered about him despite his obvious wealth, grief lines around his eyes, tension in his shoulders. His voice was low, calm. "No worries. Where are we headed?" "Cross Industries headquarters, 17th and North Michigan." Something flickered across his face, amusement maybe, or recognition, but he simply nodded. "Got it." Layla climbed in beside Simone, clutching her backpack decorated with unicorn stickers. She studied the driver with the open curiosity children possessed before the world taught them to hide it. "Are you a prince?" The driver's lips quirked. "Excuse me?" "You have a fancy car, and you dress nice." Layla gestured at his suit jacket hanging on the passenger seat. "Princes have nice things." "Layla, honey, don't bother the driver." "She's not bothering me." The driver met Layla's eyes in the mirror. I'm not a prince, just someone who likes a clean car. Do you have kids? Simone wanted the leather seat to swallow her. Layla, please. I have a daughter, the driver said. She's 8, about your size, actually. What's her name? Elena. That's pretty. My name is Layla. The driver's expression softened. Nice to meet you, Layla. That's a pretty name, too. They merged onto the highway, morning sun glinting off glass towers in the distance. The car was warm, comfortable, and Simone felt the exhaustion of 6 years as a single mother settling into her bones. She'd worked 6 jobs since Layla was born: reception, waitressing, retail, data entry, anything that would pay enough to cover rent and daycare and the endless small expenses that accumulated like snowdrifts. Each job ended for reasons beyond her control. The restaurant closed, the retail chain downsized, the reception position was eliminated after her supervisor made increasingly uncomfortable comments about her body. She'd stopped believing in stability, started believing survival was the only goal. The driver's voice interrupted her thoughts. Interview? Yes, executive assistant. Position? She shouldn't share details. Drivers didn't care. But something about his tone invited honesty. Probably a long shot. My resume has gaps, but the community outreach focus aligns with my background, so maybe. She stopped. Sorry, you don't need my life story. Don't apologize. He changed lanes smoothly. Community outreach is important work. Most corporations treat it like charity theater. Cross Industries actually seems to care. You know the company. I know of it. Layla yawned, leaned against Simone's shoulder. The driver noticed, reached back without taking his eyes off the road, and handed over a folded blanket from the back seat. My daughter left this last week. She won't miss it for a day. Simone took it, surprised. The blanket was soft, expensive. She draped it over Layla, who hummed contentedly. Thank you. That's very kind. My pleasure. They rode in comfortable silence after that, save for the whisper of tires on pavement and Layla's soft breathing. Simone studied the driver's profile when he wasn't looking. Strong jaw, slight crease between his eyebrows like worry lived there permanently. Wedding ring absent, but a pale line on his 4th finger suggested one had been there recently. Widower or divorced. She recognized the particular loneliness in the set of his shoulders. The car pulled up in front of a glass tower that seemed to scrape the sky itself, Cross Industries in steel letters across the entrance. Simone's reflection stared back at her from the tinted windows, worn jacket, thrift store skirt, hair hastily twisted into a bun. She looked small, insignificant, exactly like someone who would be turned away. We can do this, she whispered to Layla, who was waking, rubbing her eyes. The driver watched them in the mirror, expression unreadable. Good luck, Miss Keller. She paused, hand on the door. I didn't tell you my name. He gestured at the app on his phone. It's on the pickup information. Of course, she felt foolish. Right, thank you for the ride. You're welcome. Simone helped Layla out, smoothed her daughter's cornrows, straightened her own blazer. The building loomed. She didn't notice that the driver had lingered in the loading zone, watching as she guided Layla through the revolving doors. Didn't see him reach for his phone, type a quick message, then pull away from the curb. Inside, the lobby of Cross Industries gleamed with the kind of aggressive cleanliness that signaled money and power. Silver columns stretched toward a ceiling impossibly high. Every surface reflected light. Every face looked polished, pressed, perfect. Simone stepped carefully across the marble, Layla's small hand locked in hers, eyes turned toward them, sharp, assessing, finding them wanting. The reception desk stood like a fortress at the lobby's center. Behind it, a woman in her late 20s with platinum hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes looked up from her computer. Good morning. May I help you? I'm here for an interview. Simone kept her voice steady. Executive Assistant, Community Outreach, Simone Keller, 9:30. The receptionist's gaze dropped to Layla. The smile vanished. And the child? This is my daughter, Layla. I apologize for bringing her. My childcare fell through this morning, but she'll be quiet. I promise. I'm afraid children aren't permitted beyond the lobby. Company policy. Simone's chest tightened. I understand, but it's just 15 minutes for the interview. She can sit right here in the waiting area. She has books. Company policy, the receptionist repeated, tone sharpening. Liability issues. I'm sure you understand. A man in a gray suit nearby, late 50s, expensive watch, the look of someone who'd never heard the word no, chuckled under his breath. Unprofessional already, he murmured to his companion, not bothering to lower his voice. This is what happens when HR gets too enthusiastic about diversity initiatives. Heat rushed to Simone's face. She forced herself to breathe, to think. Please, I just need the chance to interview. I can type 80 words a minute. I have experience in community coordination. I worked with 3 nonprofits in Englewood. Ma'am? The receptionist's voice sliced through the air. This is a corporate office, not a charity. Without proper childcare arrangements, we cannot proceed with the interview today. You'll need to reschedule when you can appear properly prepared. The emphasis on properly prepared carried all the judgment she couldn't say directly. Properly prepared. The words landed like stones. Simone felt Layla press closer against her leg, small and frightened. She'd promised her daughter they were going somewhere important today, somewhere that might change things. Now strangers were staring, whispering, enjoying the spectacle of a desperate woman being put in her place. Please, Simone tried again, voice breaking. I just need to talk to someone. I'll stand. I'll wait in the hall. Anything. Please don't send us away. Her knees almost gave out. She caught herself on the edge of the reception desk, her tote bag sliding from her shoulder. Contents spilled across the marble floor, resume copies in a folder that flew open, pages scattering, Layla's small emergency snack bag, a crayon drawing of their new house she'd tucked in that morning for courage, everything she'd worked for scattered like evidence of failure. The laughter came soft but unmistakable from the man in the gray suit. Might want to pick that up, miss, he said, not bothering to mask his contempt. Simone knelt quickly, gathering pages with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Her throat burned. She didn't see the small circle of onlookers that had formed, didn't register the security guard approaching with his hand already moving toward her elbow. Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the lobby. I have an interview. The words came out strangled. Please, I'm scheduled. Rules are rules. Simone rose halfway, one of the resume pages slipping from her grasp, fluttering back onto the marble. Her reflection stared up at her from the polished floor, tired, desperate, humiliated. She bent to retrieve it, feeling Layla's tiny hand touch her shoulder, the only anchor keeping her from dissolving entirely. And then a new voice cut through the murmur like thunder. Actually, I'd like to hear what Miss Keller has to say. The lobby froze. Simone looked up. The man in the charcoal suit stood just beyond the security desk, his presence changing the entire temperature of the room. Employees straightened instantly. The receptionist's posture snapped into rigid respect. The man in the gray suit turned pale. It was the driver. The man who'd given Layla his daughter's blanket. The man who'd asked about her interview with genuine interest. He stood there now with the quiet authority of someone who owned not just the building, but the ground it stood on. Mr. Cross, the receptionist stammered. We didn't realize, he raised a hand. That's fine, Jessica. His gaze turned to Simone, and something in those gray eyes softened just slightly. Miss Keller, is it? She could barely speak. Yes, sir. Let's make sure your interview proceeds as planned. He glanced briefly at the receptionist, then the security guard, his expression pleasant, but somehow containing an edge sharp enough to cut. And I believe we can manage a bit of humanity in the meantime. No one replied. The only sound was the faint buzz of fluorescent lights and the hammering of Simone's pulse in her ears. Nathaniel Cross, because that's who he was, she realized with dawning horror and wonder, stepped closer. He bent slightly, picked up the fallen resume page, and handed it to her with the same care he'd shown offering the blanket. You dropped this, he said quietly, so only she could hear. And for the record, you don't need to beg anyone for the right to be seen. Simone took the page, fingers brushing his for half a second. Electric. Impossible. He turned toward the hallway, gesturing once. This way, Miss Keller. She followed on legs that felt detached from her body. Layla's hand in hers was the only thing keeping her grounded. As they walked past the reception desk, past the gaping employees, past the man in the gray suit who now looked like he'd swallowed glass, Simone's mind spun. The same man who'd listened quietly in the car, who'd given his daughter's blanket to a stranger's child, who'd wished her good luck. He wasn't a driver at all. He was Nathaniel Cross, CEO, the man who could hire or destroy her with a single word. The elevator doors opened. Nathaniel gestured for them to enter first. Simone stepped inside, Layla still pressed against her side. The doors closed, sealing them in mirrored silence. The elevator ascended smoothly, floor indicators lighting. 2, 3, 4. The building had 12 floors total, basement levels for storage and displaced employees, ground floor for public-facing operations, floors 2 to 9 for departments, and floors 10-12 for executive leadership. Nathaniel pressed the button for the 10th floor, then stood with his hands in his pockets, studying their reflections. A mother in a worn coat, a little girl clutching a stuffed rabbit she'd pulled from her backpack, a man whose very presence commanded rooms. "You stepped into a stranger's car this morning," he said suddenly, tone unreadable. Simone blinked. "I thought you were my Uber driver." "I know." He turned slightly, meeting her gaze through the reflection. "Sometimes the wrong assumption takes us to the right place." She didn't know how to respond, didn't know if this was kindness or strategy or something else entirely. The elevator chimed. Doors slid open to reveal a hallway so pristine it felt untouched, muted gray walls accented with dark wood paneling, the quiet hum of distant voices and keyboard taps. Nathaniel stepped out first, nodding to a passing assistant who nearly tripped trying to acknowledge him. He turned back to Simone and Layla. "The conference room is this way. Don't worry. I'll make sure you're settled before I leave you with the interview panel." "Mr. Cross," Simone managed, finding her voice, "I need to apologize. I didn't recognize you in the car. I should have. Why would you?" He kept walking, pace measured so Layla could keep up. "I wasn't wearing a name tag. You had no reason to assume the person driving you was anyone other than your driver." "But," he stopped, turned to face her fully. "Miss Keller, let me be clear. You did nothing wrong. The way you were treated downstairs was unacceptable. It won't happen again." "I appreciate that, but I don't want special treatment because you feel—" "I don't feel anything except impressed." His voice was firm. "You came prepared. You came despite obstacles. You came ready to fight for an opportunity you've earned. That's not someone who needs charity. That's someone who deserves a fair chance." Simone stared at him. No one had spoken to her like that in years, like she was valuable, like her struggle meant something. Layla tugged on Nathaniel's sleeve. He looked down. "Thank you for helping my mama," the little girl said, looking up at him with wide eyes. "My mama is really good. She works super hard and she's really smart. Sometimes people are mean, but she's still nice." Nathaniel crouched to Layla's level, surprising them both. "You're absolutely right. And your mama is lucky to have someone as wise as you in her corner." Layla beamed. They reached the end of the hallway where a large glass door stood open. Inside was a sleek conference room, long polished table, high back chairs, and 3 people already seated, all dressed in shades of black and charcoal. A woman in her 50s, stern-faced with silver-framed glasses, stood when she saw them. "Miss Keller," she said flatly, "we weren't expecting you to bring a child." Simone's heart sank again. She forced a smile, bent down to Layla. "Sweetheart, can you sit right here on this bench outside the door? I'll leave the door open. You can draw in your notebook like we practiced, okay?" She pulled a pink spiral pad and a few crayons from her tote. Layla nodded, already opening to a blank page. Her small legs dangled off the bench, feet too short to reach the floor. "She'll be quiet," Simone said, standing, smoothing her blouse. "I'm ready whenever you are." The stern woman, her name tag read Victoria Stratford, VP of Operations, gestured to a chair opposite the panel. Victoria was in her early 50s, with sharp features, perfectly styled blonde hair cut in a severe bob, and the kind of rigid posture that suggested military training or years of corporate warfare. Nathaniel remained standing near the back of the room. His presence was both background and center at once. No one acknowledged him aloud, but Simone felt the tension in the room shift subtly under his quiet observation. "Let's begin," Victoria said, flipping open a folder. "Your resume shows frequent job changes. Care to explain?" Simone clasped her hands in her lap, willing them to be still. "Yes, ma'am. I've worked several positions over the past few years: reception, waitressing, nonprofit coordination. Some I had to leave due to childcare conflicts or transportation issues, but I've always been reliable when employed. I've never walked away from responsibility." "Administrative experience?" This came from a man with thinning hair and a furrowed brow, Marcus Reeves, according to his desk placard. I worked at Henderson and Associates, a small accounting firm, for nearly a year. I handled scheduling, client communications, filing, invoicing. I'm familiar with standard office software, calendar management systems. Why did that position end? Victoria again, pen poised like a weapon. The business closed. Economic downturn hit small firms hard. Silence. The third interviewer, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a tablet, Karen Wu, HR director, finally looked up. Your resume shows limited formal education, no degree, modest skill set. Her tone wasn't cruel, just factual. Why should Cross Industries choose you over candidates with stronger credentials? The words hit like a physical blow. Simone's throat tightened. Her vision blurred at the edges. She looked down, willing her voice to come, to fight back. But for a moment, nothing came. Just the weight of every closed door, every dismissal, every time she'd been told she wasn't enough. Then, across the room, a small voice broke the silence. Excuse me. Every head turned. Layla stood in the doorway, notebook clutched to her chest, eyes wide but determined. My mama makes breakfast even when she's really tired, and she always braids my hair perfect and reads me stories and tells me I'm smart and brave even when things are hard. Simone's breath caught. Layla, honey, but her daughter wasn't finished. My mama makes me breakfast, and she reads me stories every night, and she says we're going to have a better house someday with my own room, and she always tries really hard. She doesn't give up. The room fell absolutely silent. Nathaniel Cross, who had been a statue at the back of the room, looked at Layla for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, not surprise, but recognition, as if he'd just confirmed something he'd already suspected. He cleared his throat, stepping forward slightly. Miss Keller, what would your previous employers say about your work ethic? Simone straightened in her chair. Her voice, though quiet, no longer trembled. They'd say I show up early. I work hard. I ask questions when I don't understand something, and I don't quit. Not when it matters. Victoria Stratford looked at Nathaniel, uncertain. He nodded once, a small gesture that somehow carried immense weight. Then he reached for the folder in front of Victoria, closed it gently, and placed it back on the table. I think we've heard enough, he said calmly. Simone's pulse thundered. Was this dismissal? Had she failed so completely that, Miss Keller, welcome to Cross Industries. She stared at him. The room tilted. Wait, really? You're hired, he repeated, and this time there was the faintest smile, not professional, personal, warm. She blinked rapidly, hands shaking as she reached for Layla's, pulling her daughter close. Thank you so much. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. Marcus looked confused. Karen Wu made a note on her tablet, expression carefully neutral. Nathaniel stepped aside, gesturing toward the hallway. Karen will walk you through onboarding this afternoon. Welcome to the team. Simone rose slowly, the weight of the morning still pressing down but no longer crushing. Layla jumped from the bench, slipping her small hand into her mother's. As they walked toward the door, Simone glanced back at Nathaniel. He hadn't moved, but he was watching them with a look she didn't quite recognize. Not pity, not even admiration, something else, something deeper. She wanted to say something profound, something that matched the magnitude of what had just happened. Instead, all that came out was, "You're not really an Uber driver, are you?" His smile widened just slightly. Not today. Outside the conference room, Karen Wu appeared with a clipboard and a warm smile. Let's get you sorted, shall we? We've got paperwork, a building tour, and I'd love to introduce you to your team. Simone followed in a daze. Layla skipped beside her, humming a song only she knew. As they turned the corner toward the elevators, Simone caught one last glimpse of Nathaniel through the glass wall. He stood alone in the conference room, hands in his pockets, staring out the window at the city below. She didn't know what to make of him, didn't know if his intervention was genuine kindness or calculated PR. Didn't know if she'd just been saved or set up for something more complicated than a job. But as the elevator doors closed and Karen Wu chatted about health benefits and vacation days, Simone allowed herself one small moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the wrong assumption had taken her to exactly the right place. Chapter 2. Simone's first day at Cross Industries began in the basement. not metaphorically. Literally in the basement, 2 floors below ground level, where the fluorescent lights flickered like dying fireflies, and the air smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and stale coffee. Her assigned workspace consisted of a metal desk with one short leg, a chair that squeaked whenever she shifted her weight, and a computer monitor from what appeared to be 2012. The woman who found her there, standing motionless, staring at the cramped cubicle like it might transform into something better if she looked long enough, had warm brown skin, laugh lines around her eyes, and the kind of presence that made you feel immediately understood. "Let me guess," the woman said, leaning against the cubicle divider with crossed arms. "They told you the main floor was undergoing renovations and you'd be temporarily relocated to alternative workspace solutions." Simone turned, startled. "How did you know?" "Because they told me the same thing 3 years ago." She extended a hand. "Rochelle Martinez, Administrative Coordinator, also known as Diversity Hire Number 7, depending on who you ask." Simone shook her hand, managing a weak smile. "Simone Keller. Oh, I know who you are. Whole building's talking about the woman the CEO personally hired after she brought her kid to the interview." Rochelle's expression wasn't judgmental. If anything, it held grudging respect. "Welcome to the dungeon, Simone. Population. Everyone Victoria Stratford wants to forget exists." The name sent a chill down Simone's spine. Victoria Stratford, the stern woman from the interview panel who'd looked at her like she was a stain on expensive carpet. "She runs operations," Rochelle continued, reading Simone's face. "And she runs it like her personal kingdom. Anyone who threatens her authority, anyone she didn't personally approve, anyone who makes her look bad by existing, we all end up down here eventually. But Mr. Cross hired me directly, which is exactly why Victoria hates you already." Rochelle pulled over a slightly less broken chair from a nearby cubicle and sat down. "Look, I'm not trying to scare you off on day one, but you should know what you're walking into. This company has 2 power structures, the official one, where Nathaniel Cross is CEO and makes the rules, and the shadow one, where Victoria controls information flow and makes people's lives hell if they cross her." Simone sank into her squeaking chair. "So I'm already on her bad side." "Honey, you were on her bad side the second you stepped into that lobby. The CEO intervening, hiring you on the spot, that's a public humiliation for someone like Victoria. She didn't get to gatekeep, didn't get to say no." Rochelle's voice softened. "I'm telling you this because you seem like good people. And good people don't last long here unless they learn the game fast." "I don't know how to play games," Simone admitted quietly. "I just need to keep this job. For my daughter." "Then keep your head down, do excellent work, and don't give Victoria ammunition." Rochelle stood, patted Simone's shoulder. "And if you need anything, really need it, not just office supplies, you come find me. 3rd cubicle from the water fountain. I've been navigating this place long enough to know which battles matter." She left, sensible heels clicking against concrete floor. Simone sat alone in the flickering light, surrounded by boxes of old files and abandoned office equipment. Her computer monitor hummed to life, login screen glowing. She typed in her new credentials, username, Skeller, temporary password, welcome 2023, and watched the desktop load with agonizing slowness. An email notification appeared immediately, from Victoria Stratford. Subject, workspace assignment and expectations. Simone clicked it open, stomach nodding. "Miss Keller, welcome to the Community Outreach Division. Your workspace has been assigned based on current availability. Please review the attached employee handbook, particularly sections on professional conduct, appropriate workplace attire, and visitor policies. Note, children are not permitted in the building except during designated family events. Your first assignment is attached. I expect preliminary research completed by end of week. Regards, Victoria Stratford, VP of Operations." The attachment was a 47-page document titled Community Partnership Feasibility Analysis, Southside Youth Mentorship Initiative. Simone opened it, scanned the dense text, felt her pulse quicken, not from anxiety, but recognition. This was her neighborhood. These were her people. She knew the community centers mentioned, the churches, the small businesses struggling to survive. She knew because she'd lived this reality for 6 years. For the first time since entering the basement, Simone smiled. Victoria Stratford wanted to bury her down here with impossible assignments. Instead, she'd just handed Simone the one thing she understood better than anyone in this glass tower: how to actually help communities that corporations usually destroyed. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. In her second week, Simone was leaving the building at 8:30 in the evening when the elevator doors opened to reveal Nathaniel Cross. He looked different than he had during the interview, tie loosened, jacket gone, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The kind of exhausted that came from 12-hour days becoming routine. He glanced up when she stepped in, surprise flickering across his features. "Miss Keller, working late. Just finishing the community assessment for Miss Stratford." She pressed the ground floor button, hyper-aware of the small space, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way his presence seemed to fill every available inch of air. "How are you settling in?" "Fine. Good. The work is interesting." He studied her for a moment, gray eyes too perceptive. "You're a terrible liar." Simone's gaze snapped to his. "Excuse me. Your workspace is in the basement. You've been given assignments that would normally be distributed across 3 people. And I've heard through various channels that certain administrative approvals you've requested have been mysteriously delayed." He leaned against the elevator wall, arms crossed. "So I'll ask again. How are you settling in?" She could lie, should lie. Instead, something about his directness, the same quality that had made her honest in his car 2 weeks ago, pulled the truth out. "I'm managing. The work itself is good. I like the community focus, and I expected there to be adjustments." "Adjustments," he repeated, voice dry. "Is that what we're calling it?" The elevator descended in silence for 3 floors. Then Nathaniel spoke again, quieter this time. "I knew about the basement assignment. I saw the facilities report after your first week. I should have intervened immediately, but I was trying to avoid the appearance of favoritism. I was wrong. That wasn't protecting you. That was protecting my own comfort." Simone turned to face him fully, forgetting for a moment that he was the CEO, that she should probably keep quiet and grateful. "Don't apologize. I've worked in worse conditions for less interesting work. At least here I'm doing something that matters. Still, you deserve better than a broken chair and flickering lights. What I deserve and what I get are usually very different things, Mr. Cross. I stopped expecting them to align a long time ago." Something in his expression shifted. Recognition, perhaps, or shared understanding. "How's Layla adjusting? I know childcare logistics can be complicated." The question surprised her. Most employers saw children as inconvenient obstacles. "She's good. My neighbor watches her after school. It's working out." "Elena asks about her sometimes. Apparently they had quite the conversation during your interview." Simone smiled despite herself. "Layla talked about it for days. She drew your daughter a picture. I didn't know if it would be appropriate to. I'd like to see it, if you're comfortable sharing." Before she could respond, the elevator jolted violently. Lights flickered. The car shuddered to a stop between floors. Simone grabbed the railing, heart hammering. "What?" Nathaniel was already pressing the emergency call button. A tinny voice responded, "This is building security. What's your emergency?" "Elevator stuck between 7 and 6. "Copy that. Maintenance is on site for a different issue. They'll get to you within 20 to 30 minutes. You folks okay in there?" Nathaniel glanced at Simone, who nodded shakily. "We're fine. Sit tight." The intercom clicked off. Silence descended, broken only by the faint hum of the elevator shaft and Simone's elevated breathing. "Are you claustrophobic?" Nathaniel asked, concern evident. "No, just startled." She lowered herself to the floor, back against the wall, suddenly aware of how much her feet hurt. The cheap heels she'd bought specifically for this job were already falling apart. Nathaniel joined her on the floor, which seemed absurd. A CEO sitting on an elevator floor in an expensive suit, but his movements were natural, unself-conscious. 20 minutes, he said. Could be worse. Could be better. He smiled faintly. Fair point. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Then Simone heard herself ask, "Why were you driving that morning? The day of my interview. You said you weren't really an Uber driver, but you were driving." Nathaniel's gaze stayed on the closed doors. "I do it sometimes. Pick up random passengers, pretend I'm someone else for an hour. It's the only time people talk to me honestly. That's lonely. He turned to look at her, something vulnerable in his expression. It is. Your daughter, Elena, you mentioned her during the ride. She's 8, smart, quiet, too serious for her age. His voice softened when he spoke about her. She struggles sometimes, since her mother died. I'm sorry. It was 3 years ago. Car accident. Sudden. He rubbed his face, exhaustion evident. Elena was 5. Old enough to remember, too young to understand. I thought work would help. Keep me busy, give me purpose. Instead, I think I've been hiding. Simone didn't know what to say. This level of honesty felt dangerous, like standing too close to something that could burn. Layla's father left when I was pregnant, she offered. Just walked out. Didn't want the responsibility. So I understand, not the grief you've experienced, but the loneliness of single parenting, the way it changes everything. Nathaniel studied her face. You're very strong. I'm very tired, she corrected. There's a difference. No, you're both, and you're still fighting. That's rare. The elevator was warm, close. Simone became aware of how near he was sitting, close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the gray threading through his dark hair at the temples. Close enough that when he shifted slightly, his shoulder brushed hers. She should move. Didn't. Miss Keller. Simone, if we're sitting on an elevator floor talking about dead spouses and absent fathers, you can call me Simone. Simone. Her name and his voice sounded different. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. All right. Are you being harassed? Beyond the workspace assignment and delayed approvals? Has anyone said or done anything that crosses a line? She thought of the anonymous note on her first day, the whispered comments she pretended not to hear in the break room, the way certain colleagues went silent when she approached. Nothing I can't handle. That's not what I asked. Their eyes met, held. There was a note, she admitted. First day, it said I wouldn't last a month. His jaw tightened. Do you still have it? I threw it away. If it happens again, keep it. Document everything. Time, place, exact wording. His voice was hard now, executive rather than confident. I won't tolerate that kind of culture in my company. Your company has had that culture long before I arrived. Which is why I'm trying to change it, but I can't fight battles I don't know exist. The elevator jolted again, moving this time, resuming its descent. They both stood quickly, smoothing clothes, recreating the professional distance that had dissolved in the darkness. The doors opened to the ground floor. Carl, the night security guard, waited with a maintenance worker. You folks all right? Fine, thank you. Nathaniel stepped out, then turned back. Simone, I meant what I said. Document everything, and if you need to reach me directly, my assistant will put you through. She nodded, not trusting her voice. As she walked toward the exit, she felt his eyes on her back, felt the weight of whatever had shifted between them in those 20 minutes of forced proximity, felt the danger of it. Because Nathaniel Cross wasn't just her employer. He was becoming something far more complicated, and Victoria Stratford, she suspected, was already noticing. 3 weeks into her employment, Simone organized her first community listening session. The location was St. Mark's Community Center on 47th Street, a building that had seen better decades but still served as the neighborhood's heart. Simone had contacted Reverend Thompson, who'd known her since Layla was a baby, and requested use of the main hall. He'd agreed immediately, asking no questions, trusting her in the way only community ties allowed. Now, facing 40 skeptical residents, elders who'd survived urban renewal, young parents struggling with gentrification, teenagers who'd learned to distrust anyone in business attire, Simone felt the full weight of representing Cross Industries. Rochelle stood beside her, handling the sign-in sheet and refreshment table. She'd volunteered to help when Simone mentioned the event, claiming she needed to get out of the dungeon occasionally before the mold claimed her. Simone stepped to the front of the room, microphone in hand, looking at faces she recognized. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the corner store. Devin, who'd graduated from the same high school Simone had attended. Maria, whose twins were in Layla's class. Good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Simone Keller, and I work for Cross Industries in their Community Outreach Division. We're here tonight because the company wants to launch a youth mentorship program in this neighborhood. But before we design anything, we need to hear from you. What does this community actually need? What would make a difference? Silence. Then an older man in the back, Mr. Johnson, who'd lived on this block for 50 years, stood up. With respect, Miss Simone, we've heard this before. Companies come in, do photo ops, make promises, then they leave. Or worse, they stay and push us out with their development projects. Why should we trust Cross Industries as any different? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Simone set down the microphone, stepping closer to the audience. You shouldn't trust it. Not yet. Trust has to be earned, and corporations, mine included, have done a lot to break that trust. I'm not here to make promises I can't keep. I'm here to listen. And if we move forward, I'm here to make sure you have a seat at every table where decisions are made, not as tokens, as partners. Easy to say when you're getting paid, someone called out. You're right, I am getting paid, and I need this job to support my daughter. But I grew up 6 blocks from here. I know what it's like when the city forgets entire neighborhoods exist. I know what it's like when the only jobs available are the ones that break your body or your spirit. She paused. I can't promise perfection, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to make sure whatever we build actually serves you. Another silence. Then Mrs. Patterson spoke, voice clear and strong. What do you need from us tonight? Tell me what youth programs currently exist. What's working, what's failing, what's missing. Tell me about barriers, transportation, cost, trust. Tell me what success would actually look like if we got it right. For the next 90 minutes, Simone listened, took notes, asked follow-up questions. Rochelle moved through the room with comment cards and contact information sheets. By the time the session ended, they had pages of feedback, dozens of email addresses, and something more valuable than data, cautious buy-in. As people filed out, Reverend Thompson approached with a smile. You did good, Simone. They needed to see someone who understands. I hope I didn't overpromise. You didn't. You were honest. That's rarer than you think. The room emptied until only Simone and Rochelle remained, packing up materials. Rochelle glanced toward the doorway, expression changing. Incoming, Simone looked up. Nathaniel Cross stood in the entrance, looking distinctly out of place in his tailored suit, amid folding chairs and faded linoleum. But his posture was relaxed, almost uncertain. Mr. Cross, Simone managed, surprised. I didn't know you were... I wasn't on the attendance list. Wanted to observe without influencing the dynamic. He stepped further into the room, studying the feedback cards spread across the table. How did it go? Better than expected. People were skeptical, but they engaged. You were remarkable. He picked up one of the comment cards, reading. You didn't speak like a corporate representative. You spoke like someone who belongs to this community. I do belong to this community. I know, that's why I wanted you in this role. He set the card down, looked at her directly. Victoria opposed this event, said it was premature, potentially embarrassing for the company. Simone's stomach dropped. I had approval from... You had my approval. That's sufficient. His tone was firm. But you should know she's building a file. Every expense report, every decision you make, every interaction with community members. She's looking for ammunition. Rochelle, pretending to organize already organized chairs, shot Simone a meaningful look. Told you so. Why are you warning me? Simone asked. Because you're doing good work. Because I won't let office politics destroy something valuable. He paused. And because you deserve to know what you're up against. I can handle Victoria Stratford. I'm sure you can, but you shouldn't have to. He checked his watch. It's late. Can I give you a ride home? Every instinct screamed warning. Accepting a ride from her CEO, alone, late at night. It was boundary crossing, potentially dangerous, definitely inappropriate. That's kind, but I have my car. Simone, his voice was softer now, almost pleading. Let me do this one small thing, please. She should say no, should maintain professional distance, should protect herself from whatever this was becoming. All right. Rochelle's eyebrows shot up, but she said nothing. Just collected her bag, waved goodbye, and left Simone standing in the community center with a man who looked at her like she was solving puzzles he'd forgotten how to answer. They walked to his car in silence. Not the black sedan from before, but but a dark blue SUV that screamed family vehicle. Car seats, scattered toys, the faint smell of apple juice and childhood. Simone climbed in, feeling the ghost of other lives, his late wife, his daughter. Nathaniel started the engine, pulled onto the empty street. Where to? She gave him the address, feeling exposed. He'd see her building with its crumbling brick and broken security door. He'd see proof of exactly how far she'd fallen, how desperate she'd been when she walked into his lobby. He didn't comment. Just drove, making the familiar turns through streets she'd walked 1,000 times. When he pulled up in front of her building, he parked but didn't speak immediately. "Thank you for tonight," he finally said, "for representing the company with integrity, for fighting when you didn't have to. I'm just doing my job." "No, you're transforming what the job could be." Their eyes met in the darkened car. Simone felt the pull again, that dangerous current that had started in the elevator, strengthened during whispered confessions, and now threatened to sweep them both away. "I should go," she whispered. "Wait." He reached across the console, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the warmth. "Simone, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to say is complicated, possibly inappropriate, and definitely ill-advised." Her pulse hammered. "Then maybe you shouldn't—" "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. "Not as an employee. As someone who walked into my car, into my building, into my life, and reminded me what courage actually looks like. And I know that's not fair. I'm your boss. You need this job. The power dynamic is impossible. But I needed you to know." Simone couldn't breathe. "Nathaniel." "You don't have to respond. I don't expect you to. I just needed to be honest. Because whatever happens next, whatever Victoria or this company or circumstances throw at us, I want you to know that hiring you was the best decision I've made in 3 years. Not because you're good at your job, though you are. Because you make me remember who I wanted to be before grief and responsibility turned me into someone who takes Uber shifts to feel human again." She should thank him politely, should exit the car and never speak of this again, should protect herself from the inevitable complications. Instead, she heard herself say, "I think about you too, and it terrifies me." His sharp intake of breath was audible. "Why?" "Because I can't afford to lose this job, can't afford to be seen as someone who slept her way into opportunity, can't afford to give Victoria or anyone else ammunition." She swallowed hard. "But when you look at me, I forget all those reasons, and that's dangerous." Nathaniel's hand moved, fingers brushing her cheek so lightly it might have been imagined. "Then we'll be careful, professional, appropriate." "Can we be?" "I don't know." His honesty was devastating. "But I'm willing to try if you are." Simone nodded, not trusting her voice. She opened the door, stepped into the cool night air, felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing against her chest. "Good night, Nathaniel." "Good night, Simone." She walked into her building without looking back, knowing that if she did, she'd see him watching, knowing that something had shifted irrevocably, knowing that careful and professional might already be impossible. Because the man who'd driven her in his car, who'd defended her in the lobby, who'd confessed in the darkness, he wasn't just her employer anymore. He was becoming the thing she'd sworn she couldn't afford. Hope wrapped in complication, possibility tangled with danger, a future she desperately wanted and absolutely couldn't risk. Upstairs, Layla was asleep on the neighbor's couch. Simone gathered her daughter carefully, carried her small body home, tucked her into their shared bed, watched her sleep with the fierce protectiveness that had defined every decision for 6 years. "I'll keep us safe," she whispered to the darkness. "I promise." But as she lay awake long after midnight, Simone couldn't stop feeling the ghost of Nathaniel's fingers on her cheek, the weight of his confession, the impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have both the job and the man, even though every instinct said that hoping for both would cost her everything. Chapter 3. The invitation arrived via email on a Wednesday morning in early October, 4 months after she'd started at Cross Industries. It had been 3 months since her first community listening session, and in that time, the programs had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Subject: Cross Industries, Annual Family Day, October 14th. Dear Cross Industries employees, you are cordially invited to our annual Family Day celebration at Lincoln Park. This event is an opportunity for our company family to connect outside the office environment. Activities include picnic lunch, games for children, team-building exercises, and remarks from leadership. Please RSVP by October 7th and indicate number of family members attending. We look forward to seeing you there. Human Resources. Simone stared at the screen, finger hovering over the delete button. Family events meant visibility, meant Layla would be around colleagues who already whispered about the CEO's charity case, meant navigating social dynamics while pretending everything was normal, meant potentially seeing Nathaniel outside the careful boundaries they'd established since that night in his car. They'd been scrupulously professional for 3 months since that night in his car. No private conversations, no lingering glances. He addressed her as Miss Keller in meetings. She called him Mr. Cross. When their paths crossed in hallways, they nodded politely and kept moving. It was killing her. You going to the family thing? Rochelle appeared at Simone's cubicle entrance, coffee in hand, reading her screen over her shoulder. I don't know. Seems awkward. It's always awkward, but the food's decent, and watching Victoria Stratford pretend to enjoy outdoor activities is worth the price of admission. Rochelle sipped her coffee. Plus, Layla would probably love it. Face painting, bounce houses, all that suburban parent stuff we usually can't afford. Simone bit her lip. Rochelle was right. Layla rarely got opportunities like this. Organized activities, other children, spaces designed for carefree joy rather than survival. Okay, we'll go. That's the spirit. And wear something comfortable. Last year, Gerald Finch tried to play kickball and pulled his hamstring. It was glorious. October 14th dawned with that particular quality of autumn sunlight that made Chicago feel almost magical. Crisp air, golden leaves, the promise of winter still distant enough to ignore. Simone dressed Layla in her favorite purple dress with the twirly skirt, braided her hair with care, and tried to ignore her own reflection. She'd chosen jeans and a simple sweater, practical for outdoor activities, but suddenly feeling inadequate. Mama, are there going to be other kids? Layla bounced in the passenger seat as they drove toward Lincoln Park. Lots of them. What if they don't like me? Simone glanced at her daughter, saw the familiar anxiety that lived in children who'd learned too young that the world could be unkind. Then they're missing out on knowing someone extraordinary. But I think they'll love you, baby. Just be yourself. The park was already crowded when they arrived. Families spreading blankets, children racing toward activity stations, the smell of grilled food drifting on the breeze. A banner reading Cross Industries Family Day stretched between 2 oak trees. Rochelle waved from a picnic table near the face painting booth. Over here! Simone guided Layla through the crowd, hyper-aware of eyes tracking them. Some curious, some friendly, some calculating. She spotted Victoria Stratford near the registration table, clipboard in hand, surveying the event like a general inspecting troops. Their eyes met briefly. Victoria's smile was glacial. Simone! Layla! Rochelle swept them into immediate activity, preventing awkward standing around. Face painting first. I'm told the artist can do amazing butterflies. Layla's anxiety evaporated at the word butterflies. She ran toward the booth, joining a small cluster of children waiting their turn. Simone started to follow, but Rochelle caught her arm. Give her space, she's fine. Rochelle nodded toward a shaded area. And you might want to prepare yourself. The boss is here, with his daughter. Simone's heart stuttered. She turned, scanning the crowd, and found him immediately. Nathaniel stood near the volleyball net, looking beautifully out of place in dark jeans and a slate-gray Henley that somehow made him more, rather than less, intimidating. His daughter Elena clung to his hand, a small, serious girl with dark hair and a ponytail, and glasses that seemed too large for her face. She wore a green dress and kept her eyes on the ground, clearly uncomfortable with the noise and activity. As if sensing Simone's gaze, Nathaniel looked up. Their eyes locked across 50 feet of grass and families and careful pretense. He said something to Elena, who nodded. Then they were walking toward her, and Simone couldn't breathe properly, couldn't remember how to arrange her face into appropriate professional pleasantness. Miss Keller? Nathaniel's voice was carefully neutral. Good to see you. Mr. Cross, she managed to keep her voice steady. This is a lovely event. Elena insisted we come. She doesn't usually enjoy crowds, but he glanced down at his daughter who was peeking at Simone from behind his leg. Elena, you remember Miss Keller from a few months ago? Elena nodded, barely audible. Hi. Simone crouched to her level, instinct overriding nerves. Hi, Elena. I like your dress. Green is a very sophisticated color. Elena's eyes widened slightly. Really? Absolutely. And those glasses are fantastic. I've always wished I needed glasses. They make people look intelligent. A tiny smile appeared on Elena's face. Daddy says they make me look like a tiny professor. Your daddy is very smart. Are you here with your daughter? Elena asked, voice gaining confidence. The one who came to your interview? Layla? I am. She's over at the face painting booth right now. Would you like to meet her? I think she'd love to have a friend. Elena looked up at Nathaniel, seeking permission. He nodded, something soft and grateful in his expression. Go ahead, sweetheart. Elena took Simone's extended hand, and together they walked toward the face painting booth. Nathaniel followed a few steps behind, close enough to supervise, but far enough to give the illusion of distance. Layla was just finishing her butterfly, elaborate purple and silver wings that stretched from cheek to temple, when she spotted them. Mama, look! Then she saw Elena and froze. Oh, hi, I remember you. You were at the big building when Mama got her job. Elena smiled shyly. I remember you too. You said funny things. I say lots of funny things. Do you want to get your face painted? They can do unicorns and dragons and all kinds of stuff. I don't know. Elena hesitated, glancing back at Nathaniel. I'll stay with you, Layla announced with the confident authority of a 6-year-old who'd decided someone needed protection. It doesn't hurt at all. It just tickles a little bit. Elena considered this, then nodded. Okay. The two girls sat side by side on the bench, Layla chattering about school and her favorite books, while Elena listened with increasing animation. Simone watched, throat tight with emotion she couldn't name. Nathaniel moved beside her, careful to maintain appropriate distance. She doesn't usually open up like that. Layla has that effect. She decided a long time ago that being friendly was better than being scared. Elena's been the opposite. Since Charlotte died, she's been withdrawn. Scared of connection, I think. Scared it'll be taken away again. Simone's chest ached. That's a heavy burden for an 8-year-old. It is. He was quiet for a moment. I've tried everything. Therapy, activities, playdates with children of colleagues. Nothing worked. She just retreats further. Maybe she doesn't need organized solutions. Maybe she just needs someone who doesn't expect anything from her except presence. They watched as the face painter finished Elena's design, a delicate fairy with sparkles. Elena touched it carefully, then grinned, a full, genuine smile that transformed her entire face. Can Layla come to our house? The question burst out of Elena before she could stop it. Please, Daddy. We could draw and play and... Elena, Nathaniel started, clearly uncomfortable with the professional complication, but Layla was already bouncing with excitement. Can I, Mama? Please. I promise I'll be good and use my manners in everything. Simone met Nathaniel's eyes over the girls' heads, saw the same conflict she felt, the desperate desire to give their daughter something good, warring with the knowledge that crossing this boundary would make everything more complicated. If Mr. Cross is comfortable, Simone said carefully, and if it's not an imposition. Saturday? Nathaniel offered, voice tight with restrained hope. Afternoon, if you're both available? We're available, Simone confirmed, feeling the ground shift beneath her. Elena and Layla erupted in excited chatter, already planning their activities. Around them, the family day continued. Food served, games played, colleagues performing the choreography of corporate camaraderie. But Simone was hyper-aware of Victoria Stratford, watching from across the park, phone in hand, expression calculating. This would be reported, analyzed, used. Rochelle appeared at Simone's elbow, voice low. You know she's taking notes, right? I know. And you're doing it anyway? Simone watched Layla and Elena giggling together, watched Nathaniel's face as he observed his daughter's genuine happiness for the first time in months. I'm doing it anyway? Saturday arrived with the weight of a decision that couldn't be unmade. Simone had changed outfits 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a cream sweater, casual enough to not seem like she was trying too hard, nice enough to not embarrass herself in what she assumed would be Nathaniel's elegant home. Layla wore her favorite dress and carried a small backpack stuffed with drawing supplies and the stuffed rabbit that went everywhere with her. "Are we going to the castle?" Layla asked as they drove north into neighborhoods where houses had actual yards and trees that weren't struggling to survive. "I don't think it's a castle, baby. Mr. Nice Driver lives somewhere fancy, I know it." "Mr. Cross," Simone corrected gently. "And remember what we talked about. We're guests. We use our manners. We don't touch things without asking. And if Elena wants to play something you don't like, you compromise." "I know, Mama. I'm very good at manners." The GPS directed them to a residential street in Lincoln Park, not ostentatious mansions, but elegant brownstones with manicured gardens and the kind of quiet that only money could buy. Nathaniel's house was toward the end, 3 stories of warm brick with black shutters and window boxes still holding late-season flowers. Simone parked on the street, took a deep breath. "Ready?" Layla was already unbuckling her seatbelt. They walked up the stone path to the front door. Before Simone could knock, it flew open to reveal Elena, vibrating with excitement. "You're here! Come in! I set up the craft supplies in the playroom, and Daddy made snacks and—" She grabbed Layla's hand, pulling her inside. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, and Simone forgot how to form words. He wore jeans and a dark gray sweater, feet bare, hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked softer than she'd ever seen him, more human, more dangerous to her carefully maintained defenses. "Welcome," he said, stepping aside. "Ignore the chaos. Elena's been preparing since dawn." The interior was exactly what she'd expected, and somehow more. Hardwood floors, comfortable furniture that showed actual use, walls covered with Elena's artwork and family photographs. But it wasn't cold or museum-like. It felt lived in, loved. A silver-haired man emerged from what appeared to be the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Tall, distinguished, with Nathaniel's gray eyes and the kind of presence that commanded rooms without effort. "You must be Simone," he said, extending a hand. "Thomas Cross, Nathaniel's father. I've heard a great deal about you." Simone shook his hand, shooting Nathaniel a questioning glance. "All good, I hope?" "My son tends toward understatement. He mentioned you were doing interesting work with the community outreach program. Having reviewed the quarterly reports myself, I'd say you're revolutionizing an initiative that's been stagnant for 5 years. Thomas smiled warmly. "Cross Industries started as a neighborhood hardware store in Englewood. My father built it from nothing. We've been successful, but success has a way of making people forget where they came from. You're reminding us. I'm just trying to build something sustainable." "Exactly. Not charity theater. Actual partnership." He gestured toward the kitchen. "I made lemonade. Fresh squeezed, none of that powder nonsense. And there are cookies if small humans need bribing." The afternoon unfolded with surprising ease. Thomas proved to be delightfully irreverent, telling stories about young Nathaniel's misadventures that made his son groan and Simone laugh until her sides hurt. The girls disappeared into Elena's playroom, their laughter drifting through the house like music. Eventually, Thomas excused himself, a prior engagement he'd coincidentally forgotten, leaving Nathaniel and Simone alone in the living room with coffee and the comfortable silence of people who'd stopped pretending. "Your father is wonderful," Simone said. "He likes you. That's rare. He usually interrogates my—" Nathaniel stopped, caught himself. "People I bring around Elena." "Was about to say dates, weren't you?" Simone's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "This isn't a date. No, it's more complicated than that." They sat on opposite ends of the couch, carefully maintaining distance, but the air between them felt charged. Through the large window, afternoon sun painted everything gold. "I haven't brought anyone home since Charlotte," Nathaniel admitted quietly. "Elena's met colleagues, of course, but never in this space, never in a way that implied importance." "And this implies importance?" He turned to face her fully. "Yes." Simone's pulse quickened. "Nathaniel, I know, we agreed to be professional, appropriate, but watching our daughters together, watching you in this space—" He stopped, searching for words. "This feels right, and I'm tired of pretending it doesn't." Your father left us alone on purpose. He's not subtle. Nathaniel moved slightly closer, not touching but near enough that Simone felt the heat of him. He also gave me a 20-minute lecture this morning about not being an idiot. Apparently, everyone except me has noticed that I've been moping around like a teenager with his first crush. Despite everything, Simone laughed. You don't mope. I absolutely mope. You've disrupted my carefully organized emotional avoidance. It's very inconvenient. I'm sorry? Don't be. His voice dropped, serious now. Simone, I need to tell you something. And I need you to just listen, not argue, not deflect. Can you do that? She nodded, not trusting her voice. When Charlotte died, I stopped living. I functioned, ran the company, raised Elena, maintained appearances. But I stopped feeling anything real, stopped believing connection was possible or even desirable. Then you walked into my car, into my life, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to be awake. He paused. You're brilliant and brave, and you fight for your daughter with a fierceness that makes me want to be better. And yes, the power dynamic is complicated. Yes, there will be people who make assumptions. But I'm asking, if you're willing, can we try? Carefully, privately, with absolute priority on protecting both Layla and Elena? Simone's eyes burned with unshed tears. I'm terrified. So am I. I can't lose this job, can't risk Layla's stability, I know. Which is why we'll be careful. No public displays, no office complications, just us. When we can, if you want. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the vulnerability beneath the CEO exterior, saw the lonely father who drove strangers to feel human, saw the man who'd defended her in a lobby when he didn't have to. I want, she whispered. Nathaniel's sharp intake of breath was audible. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently cupped her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone with reverence, like she was something precious rather than something convenient. I'm going to kiss you, he said softly. And if you want me to stop, just say so. She didn't say anything. His lips met hers with a tenderness that unraveled something in her chest. Not urgent or demanding, but patient, like he had all the time in the world to learn the shape of her mouth, the rhythm of her breathing. Simone's hands found his shoulders, gripping like she might float away otherwise. The kiss deepened. Weeks of restraint, months of careful distance, years of loneliness all converged into this single moment of connection. Nathaniel's fingers tangled in her hair. Simone's body curved toward his. They fit together like pieces of a puzzle that had been waiting to be solved. From upstairs came the sound of children's laughter, grounding, sobering. They broke apart, breathing hard. Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. This is dangerous, Simone said. I know. Victoria will find out eventually. Probably. And it could. Destroy everything I've built. I won't let it. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I promise you, Simone, whatever happens, I will protect you and Layla, always. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that powerful men kept promises to women with everything to lose. But years of disappointment had taught her caution. Still, when Elena and Layla thundered downstairs demanding hot chocolate and asking if Simone and Layla could stay for dinner, when Nathaniel's hand found hers under the table while they ate pasta and listened to 6- and 8-year-old chatter, when he walked them to the car at the end of the evening and kissed her again in the shadows of his front porch, Simone let herself hope. Just a little. Just enough to be dangerous. Monday morning, the anonymous complaint was waiting in her email. Subject: Workplace conduct concern. To Human Resources, I'm writing to report a concern regarding inappropriate conduct between CEO Nathaniel Cross and employee Simone Keller. Multiple staff members have observed behavior suggesting a personal relationship that creates conflict of interest and potential favoritism. Specific incidents include extended private conversations in elevators and after hours, CEO providing direct approval for Ms. Keller's projects without standard review processes, CEO and Ms. Keller attending company family event together and leaving together with their respective children, CEO visiting Ms. Keller's community outreach events unannounced. This relationship, if romantic in nature, violates company policy regarding fraternization between supervisors and direct reports. It also creates unfair advantages and undermines morale among other employees who follow appropriate professional boundaries. I request immediate investigation. A concerned employee. Simone's hands shook as she read, then reread, then stared at the screen until the words blurred. Rochelle appeared at her cubicle entrance, face grim. You got it too. 2. CC'd to half the senior leadership team, including Victoria. Rochelle's voice was tight. Simone, this is bad. HR has to investigate formal complaints, even anonymous ones. But we're not. Simone stopped. They had been careful, but they'd also been observed. And enough observation, even of innocent interactions, could be weaponized. Her phone buzzed. Text from Nathaniel. My office, now. Don't panic. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one whose job hung by a thread. She took the elevator to the 10th floor, each second an eternity. Nathaniel's assistant waved her through without questions, expression sympathetic. The door to his office was closed. Simone knocked, entered. Nathaniel stood at the window, back to her, posture rigid. When he turned, his face was carefully blank, corporate mask firmly in place. Close the door, she did. You got the email? Yes. He moved to his desk, pulled out a printed copy, studied it like the words might change if he looked hard. Enough. It's Victoria. Has to be. You can't know that. I know. His voice was hard. The phrasing, the specific incidents cited, the timing. She's been building this case since the community event, maybe earlier. Simone sank into a chair, legs suddenly unable to support her. What happens now? HR will open an investigation. They'll interview both of us separately, ask about the nature of our relationship, review your work performance for evidence of favoritism. He set the paper down. Simone, I need you to tell me the truth. Has there been any actual favoritism, any decision I've made regarding your work that wasn't justified by merit? She thought back through 3 months. No. Every approval you gave was for projects with documented community support. Every budget allocation was under standard limits. Everything was defensible. Good, then we focus on that. He paused. The personal aspect. We tell them nothing happened while I was your employee, which is technically true. We kissed once on Saturday, off company property, outside work hours. They'll ask if there's romantic interest. Simone met his eyes. Do we lie? I don't know. The admission cost him. I want to protect you, but I also won't ask you to lie under investigation. That could cost you more in the long run. And if we admit there's interest but claim we've maintained boundaries? They might accept it, or they might decide the appearance of impropriety is enough to require one of us to transfer divisions or leave the company. It won't be you who leaves. It won't be you either. His voice was fierce. I'll fight this, Simone. I'll fight Victoria, the board, whoever I have to— Stop. She stood, moved closer. You can't protect me from everything, can't fight every battle. Sometimes the best we can do is survive with dignity. That's not enough. It has to be. She touched his arm briefly, then stepped back. I knew the risks when I said yes Saturday. I went in with my eyes open. You shouldn't have to choose between your job and— He stopped. And what? And me. You shouldn't have to choose. The door opened without warning. Victoria Stratford stood in the entrance, Karen Wu from HR beside her, expressions carefully neutral. Mr. Cross, Miss Keller. Victoria's voice was ice. How convenient to find you both here. Karen needs to schedule formal interviews regarding the complaint, unless you'd like to make this easier and simply acknowledge the relationship now? Nathaniel's face hardened. Miss Stratford, you're overstepping. This is an HR matter, not your personal vendetta. I'm VP of Operations. Workplace conduct is absolutely my concern. Karen Wu shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we could schedule interviews for this afternoon? Separately, of course, standard protocol. Simone found her voice. I'm available whenever needed. As am I, Nathaniel added, eyes never leaving Victoria's. Though I'll also be requesting a formal review of how this complaint was disseminated. Sending it to half the senior leadership team before HR even reviewed it violates privacy protocols. Victoria's smile was sharp. The complaint was sent to appropriate oversight. If you have concerns about process, feel free to file them after the investigation concludes. She left, heels clicking triumph. Karen Wu lingered. "For what it's worth," the HR director said quietly, "I'll conduct this fairly. I'm not interested in witch hunts, just facts." "Thank you," Simone managed. When they were alone again, Nathaniel exhaled slowly. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated." "Stop. We're in this together." She touched his hand briefly. "Whatever happens, we face it together." He nodded, but his expression was haunted, because they both knew the truth. Together was a luxury people like them couldn't afford, and Victoria Stratford had just reminded them exactly how much power she still held. Chapter 4. The HR interview took place on Tuesday afternoon, the day after the anonymous complaint arrived, in a windowless conference room that smelled of stale air and anxiety. Karen Wu sat across from Simone with a legal pad, a recorder, and an expression of professional sympathy that somehow made everything worse. "This is a preliminary inquiry, not a formal disciplinary proceeding," Karen began. "You're not under investigation for misconduct. We're simply gathering information about the nature of your relationship with Mr. Cross to determine if any policy violations have occurred. Do you understand?" Simone nodded, throat dry. "Yes." "Have you engaged in a romantic or sexual relationship with Nathaniel Cross at any point since beginning employment at Cross Industries?" "No," Karen made a note. "Have you and Mr. Cross spent time together outside of work in a social capacity?" "Once, this past Saturday. Our daughters played together at his home. His father was present for most of the visit." "And during this visit, did anything of a romantic nature occur?" Simone hesitated. The kiss on the porch had been after Thomas left, after the girls were distracted with a movie. Private, but also undeniable. "We kissed. Once, when I was leaving." Karen's pen paused. "I appreciate your honesty. Has Mr. Cross made any promises regarding your employment, advancement, or job security in exchange for romantic attention?" "No. Never." "Has he shown favoritism toward your work that you believe was unearned or based on personal feelings rather than merit?" "No. Every approval I've received has been for projects with documented community support and measurable outcomes. I can provide data. That won't be necessary right now." Karen's voice softened slightly. "Simone, I've reviewed your performance file. Your work is exceptional. The community outreach programs have exceeded all benchmarks. But perception matters in these situations. If other employees believe you're receiving special treatment, it undermines morale and creates liability." "I understand. Do you believe Mr. Cross has romantic feelings for you?" The question landed like a stone. Simone thought of Nathaniel's confession in his living room, the tenderness in his kiss, the way he looked at her like she'd solved something broken in him. "Yes." "And you reciprocate those feelings?" "Yes." Karen set down her pen. "Then we have a problem. Company policy prohibits romantic relationships between supervisors and direct reports specifically to prevent conflicts of interest. The power dynamic makes consent murky at best, exploitative at worst. Even if neither of you believes there's been favoritism, the appearance is enough to require action." "What kind of action?" "That depends on several factors. If the relationship is serious and ongoing, one of you would need to transfer to a different division where there's no direct reporting structure. If it's casual or ending, we might issue written warnings and require professional boundaries going forward." Simone's stomach knotted. "And if we refuse either option? Then termination becomes likely for one or both of you." Karen's expression was genuinely sympathetic now. "I'm not trying to be cruel, but I've seen this scenario play out badly too many times. The person with less power, almost always the woman, ends up carrying the consequences while the person with more power survives professionally. So I lose my job either way." "Not necessarily. There are other divisions within Cross Industries. Your skills are transferable." "But not to community outreach, not to work I actually care about." Simone's voice cracked. "I'd be shuffled into some administrative role where I'm out of sight, my programs handed to someone else, and everyone would know exactly why it happened." Karen didn't deny it. The interview concluded with standard warnings about retaliation and confidentiality. Simone left feeling hollowed out, walking through the building like a ghost. Colleagues who normally ignored her now watched with undisguised interest. The whisper campaign had gone nuclear. Rochelle intercepted her before she reached the basement stairs. "Come on, we're leaving." "It's only 2 o'clock. Personal day. I already submitted the request under your name. You're not sitting in that dungeon while people speculate about whether you slept your way into a job you're overqualified for." They drove to a diner 3 blocks away. Ancient vinyl booths, coffee that could strip paint, and the blessed anonymity of strangers. Rochelle ordered them both burgers and waited until Simone had eaten half of hers before speaking. "How bad?" "Bad. They're going to make me transfer or fire me." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. We kissed once. We have feelings. No favoritism, no quid pro quo, but enough to violate policy." Rochelle stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "You know what kills me? Victoria's been running this company like her personal fiefdom for years. She's destroyed careers, buried complaints, created a culture of fear. But the second someone like you, someone who actually threatens her power, shows up, suddenly she's the champion of workplace ethics. Can you prove any of that?" "Not easily. She's smart, covers her tracks, uses NDAs and settlements to silence people." Rochelle paused. "But there are patterns if you know where to look." "What do you mean?" "I've been here 8 years. I've watched good people get crushed under Victoria's heel. I've heard whispers, and I've kept my own documentation, not evidence exactly, but notes, names, dates, things that didn't add up." She leaned forward. "What if we stopped playing defense and went on offense? You're suggesting I investigate my boss's boss while I'm under investigation for inappropriate conduct? That seems like a bad plan." "Is it worse than losing everything anyway?" Rochelle's eyes were fierce. "You've got nothing to lose now, Simone. They've already decided you're guilty. Might as well make sure the real villain gets exposed." Simone wanted to argue, wanted to say she'd find another way, maintain dignity, take the high road. But Rochelle was right. The game was rigged. Playing by rules that only applied to some people was a losing strategy. "What would I be looking for?" "Old HR complaints, settlement agreements, patterns of retaliation. Victoria's been at Cross Industries for 15 years. There's got to be a paper trail somewhere." "HR files are confidential. I don't have access." "But Nathaniel does." Simone shook her head. "I can't ask him to risk his position. He's already risking it. For you. The question is whether you're willing to let him fight alone or if you're going to fight back too." Thursday evening, 3 days after the complaint landed, Simone sat in her apartment while Layla did homework at their small table, trying to formulate words for an impossible conversation. Her phone sat on the counter like an accusation. She'd texted Nathaniel only once since the interview. "We need to talk, not at the office." His response had been immediate. "My place." 8 p.m. "Elena's having a sleepover at a friend's house. We can talk freely." Now, at 7:30, Simone was second-guessing everything. Going to his house alone felt reckless, but meeting anywhere public was worse, and they needed to have this conversation without corporate walls listening. Her mother agreed to watch Layla via video call, reading bedtime stories through the phone screen, a poor substitute for physical presence, but better than nothing. Simone kissed her daughter's forehead, promised she'd be home soon, and drove north toward Nathaniel's neighborhood with her heart hammering. He answered the door before she could knock, expression drawn. "Come in." The house felt different without children's energy, quieter, emptier, like a stage waiting for actors who'd forgotten their lines. Nathaniel led her to his study, a room she hadn't seen during Saturday's visit. Dark, wood shelves lined with law books and business texts, a desk covered in papers, photographs on the walls, his late wife, beautiful and laughing, Elena at various ages, Thomas Cross at the original hardware store. "Drink?" Nathaniel offered, gesturing to a bar cart. "No, I need to think clearly." He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, drank half immediately. "Karen Wu called me after your interview. She's recommending I recuse myself from all decisions regarding your employment and that you be offered a lateral transfer to another division." "Which means leaving community outreach." "Yes. And if I refuse?" "Termination with cause, which would make you ineligible for unemployment benefits and make finding another position nearly impossible with that on your record." Simone sank into a leather chair, suddenly exhausted. "So we lose either way." "Not we. You. I keep my position, my authority, my life. You're the one who pays." He set down his glass with barely controlled violence. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. The power dynamic made this inevitable." "Then why did you pursue it?" The question hung between them, sharp and necessary. Nathaniel moved to the window, back to her, shoulders rigid. "Because for the first time in 3 years, I felt alive. Because watching you fight for your daughter reminded me why any of this mattered. Because I'm selfish enough to want something for myself instead of just existing for the company and Elena. And now your selfishness is going to cost me everything." He turned, face stricken. "I know. And I'd give anything to undo it, to go back and just be your employer, nothing more, to protect you properly instead of—" "Stop." Simone stood. "I made my choices too. I kissed you back. I said yes. I went into this knowing the risks." She moved closer. "But I need you to understand something. I can't survive on good intentions and guilt. If we're going down, I need to know we're fighting back." "What are you proposing?" "Rochelle thinks Victoria has a history. Old complaints, buried scandals, patterns of retaliation. If we could find evidence—" "You want me to dig through confidential HR files looking for ammunition against my VP of operations?" Nathaniel's voice was incredulous. "I want you to find the truth about what kind of culture Victoria's created, what she's done to other employees, whether this complaint about us is part of a larger pattern." Simone held his gaze. "You said you wanted to change the company culture, wanted to build something better. Here's your chance. If I'm caught accessing those files improperly, then you face consequences, like I'm already facing." Her voice was hard now. "I'm not asking you to save me, Nathaniel. I'm asking you to be brave enough to look at what's really happening in your own company." He stared at her for a long moment, then moved to his desk, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a laptop, separate from his work computer, she noticed. "I already started looking," he admitted quietly. "After the elevator conversation where you mentioned the anonymous note, I requested access to historical HR records under the guise of conducting a cultural audit." He opened the laptop, pulled up files. "What I found isn't pretty." Simone moved behind him, reading over his shoulder. Pages of complaints, dozens of them. Women reporting hostile work environments, inappropriate comments, retaliation for speaking up. Most were marked resolved, but the resolutions were always the same. Settlement payments, non-disclosure agreements, the complainants leaving the company within months. And Victoria Stratford's name appeared over and over, not always as the direct harasser, but as the person who managed the complaints, who negotiated the settlements, who ensured silence. "How far back does this go?" Simone asked, voice shaking. 15 years, since she was promoted to director level and given authority over HR processes. He scrolled to a particular file, highlighted in red. "This one's from 7 years ago. A woman named Charlotte Weber filed a complaint about Victoria creating a hostile environment, making comments about her appearance and competence, systematically excluding her from meetings and opportunities." Simone's breath caught. "Charlotte, your wife's name was Charlotte." "Yes." "Is this—" "The same woman?" Nathaniel's voice was hollow. "Charlotte worked at Cross Industries for 6 months, 8 years ago, before we started dating. She filed a complaint about Victoria creating a hostile environment. The complaint was settled with an NDA, and Charlotte left the company shortly after. We got engaged a year later, had Elena, and built 4 years of life together before the accident took her from us." He closed his eyes. "She never told me Victoria drove her out, never told me she'd filed a complaint that got buried under an NDA. She just left and took that pain with her." "Why wouldn't she tell you?" "Because she knew I'd confront Victoria, knew it would create a war. She was protecting me, protecting the company." His laugh was bitter. "And I let Victoria continue doing the same thing to other women for 7 more years because I was too blind to see it." Simone's hand found his shoulder. "You didn't know." "I should have. I'm the CEO. It's my job to know." He opened another file, recent, time-stamped 3 weeks ago. "This is the formal complaint about us, filed through the anonymous reporting system, but the login shows it was filed using Victoria's administrative credentials. She has override access to the anonymous system for quality assurance purposes, according to her role permissions. She got sloppy and filed it under her own access instead of creating a fake employee account. Likely because she was rushing, she filed it Monday morning right after seeing you leave the family event with Nathaniel. She was angry and moved fast. Can you prove that? Our IT department can, if asked to. Investigate properly instead of just processing the complaint at face value. Simone's mind raced. So we have a pattern of Victoria bearing complaints, using NDAs to silence victims, and now filing a false complaint to eliminate someone she views as a threat. That's not HR oversight. That's abuse of power. It's also career suicide for her if it comes out. Nathaniel turned to face Simone. But exposing this means exposing Charlotte's complaint, making public something she chose to keep private. I don't know if I have the right. You have the obligation. Simone's voice was firm, not just to Charlotte's memory, but to every other woman Victoria has hurt and will hurt if this continues. Sometimes protecting one person's privacy means sacrificing everyone else's safety. He searched her face. You're sure? I'm sure that I'm not going down without a fight. I'm sure that Layla deserves a mother who doesn't teach her to accept injustice quietly. And I'm sure that you started Cross Industries' community outreach program because you wanted to build something better than what existed. It's time to apply that same principle to your own company. Nathaniel stood, something shifting in his posture, resolve replacing guilt. Then we do this properly. We compile everything, present it to the board with a formal recommendation for Victoria's immediate suspension and independent investigation. We go public with the pattern, not to destroy her personally, but to force systematic change. And us? The complaint about our relationship? We acknowledge it, own it, admit that feelings developed, but maintain that no favoritism occurred. Your work speaks for itself. He moved closer, hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. Simone, I can't promise this won't get worse before it gets better. Can't promise we'll both survive professionally, but I can promise I'll fight for you with everything I have. I'm not asking you to fight for me. I'm asking you to fight with me. Then that's what we'll do. He kissed her then, not the tentative exploration of Saturday, but something deeper, desperate. A kiss that tasted like shared determination and mutual fear and the strange courage that came from having nothing left to lose. Simone's hands found his chest, felt his heart hammering to match her own. Weeks of restraint, days of anxiety, hours of imagining worst-case scenarios, all of it dissolved into this moment of connection. They stumbled backward until Simone's back hit the bookshelf. Nathaniel's mouth moved to her neck, finding the pulse point that made her gasp. We shouldn't, she started. I know. If anyone finds out. I don't care. And in that moment, neither did she. They moved through the house in a blur, kissing desperately, shedding clothing like armor they no longer needed, whispering confessions that had been building for months. Nathaniel's bedroom was masculine and simple, dominated by a large bed that Simone barely registered. Before they fell into it, his hands were reverent, learning the landscape of her body with patient attention. Simone arched under his touch, years of exhaustion and loneliness melting away under the warmth of being wanted. Not needed. Her daughter needed her, not used. Past employers had used her, but wanted, chosen, seen. You're trembling, Nathaniel murmured against her skin. I'm terrified. Of this? Of how much I want it. She pulled him closer, their bodies aligning with devastating rightness. Of how much I want you. He kissed her again, slower this time, communicating things words couldn't capture. Then his body joined hers in a moment that felt less like physical act and more like emotional surrender. Two people who'd been alone too long finally finding home in each other. They moved together with increasing urgency, months of restraint transforming into passionate intensity. Simone lost track of where she ended, and Nathaniel began. Lost track of everything except the sensation of being completely, utterly present. No past failures, no future fears, just this. When they finally collapsed together, breathing hard and tangled in sheets, Simone felt something shift in her chest, not just physical satisfaction, but emotional breakthrough. She'd spent 6 years protecting herself, building walls, refusing vulnerability because vulnerability meant weakness. But this, lying in Nathaniel's arms, their hearts beating in syncopation, their futures bound together by choice rather than circumstance, this was strength she hadn't known existed. "I love you," Nathaniel said quietly. Not a question or a confession seeking reciprocation, just a statement of fact. Simone turned to face him, traced the line of his jaw. "I love you too, and that terrifies me more than Victoria or the board or any of it." "Why?" "Because love makes you vulnerable, makes you have something to lose. I've spent years making sure I had nothing to lose except Layla. Now I have you and Elena and a future I actually want." Her eyes burned. "What if we can't protect it?" "Then we rebuild." He kissed her forehead. "Together. That's what people who love each other do." They stayed like that for hours, talking, planning, occasionally dissolving into the kind of physical connection that felt like conversation in a different language. By the time Simone left at midnight, they had a strategy. Compile the evidence, present it to the board Monday morning, request immediate suspension of Victoria pending investigation, demand systematic policy review. It was risky. It was audacious. It would likely make powerful enemies. But it was also right. As Simone drove home through empty streets, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope wrapped in purpose, vulnerability transmuted into strength. She'd stopped surviving and started fighting, and regardless of what happened next, that transformation alone was worth everything. The following Monday, a week and a half after the EBO complaint first appeared, arrived with the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. Nathaniel called an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m., citing urgent cultural and ethical concerns requiring immediate attention. Victoria had been notably excluded from the invite list. Gerald Finch had sent 3 emails demanding explanation. Thomas Cross, serving as board chairman since his retirement from operational duties, had simply replied, "I'll be there." Simone arrived at work at 7 before most employees and went directly to Nathaniel's office. He was already there, surrounded by printed files, looking like he hadn't slept. "Coffee?" she offered, holding up the extra cup she'd brought. "You're a saint." He took it gratefully. "I've been rehearsing the presentation since 4 a.m. "You don't have to do this alone. I can present with you." "No, this has to come from me. You're already in a vulnerable position. Putting you in front of the board makes it look like retaliation or manipulation." He touched her face briefly. "Trust me to handle this part." She did, though it cost her. At 8:45, board members began arriving. 8 people who controlled Cross Industries' direction, who could hire and fire executive leadership, who held Nathaniel's career in their hands despite his family name. Thomas entered last, caught Simone's eye, and winked. Nathaniel distributed folders containing executive summaries, careful to protect specific identities while illustrating patterns. Then he began. "Thank you for coming on short notice. What I'm about to share is disturbing and frankly embarrassing for me personally. Over the past week, I've conducted a comprehensive review of HR complaints and settlements dating back 15 years. What I found represents systematic failure of our ethical obligations and my failure of leadership." He walked them through it methodically. The pattern of complaints, the NDAs, the settlements, Victoria's consistent presence, the metadata showing she'd filed the complaint against him and Simone from her own computer. "This isn't about one person's misconduct," Nathaniel concluded. "It's about a culture that allowed abuse to continue unchecked because confronting it was uncomfortable, including one complaint filed by my late wife 8 years ago, a complaint I never knew existed because she was pressured into silence." The room went absolutely still. Thomas spoke first, voice rough with emotion. "Charlotte filed a complaint?" "Yes, about Victoria Stratford creating a hostile environment. The complaint was settled with an NDA. Charlotte left the company shortly after." Nathaniel's voice was steady despite the pain underneath. "I've spent the past 3 days trying to understand why she never told me. The only conclusion I can reach is that she was protecting me from exactly this moment, having to choose between loyalty to a longtime executive and accountability to our values." Gerald Finch cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Nathaniel, this seems like an overreaction to one anonymous complaint about your personal relationship with—" "It's not anonymous," Nathaniel pulled up the metadata. Victoria filed it herself, used the anonymous reporting system to manufacture grounds for removing Miss Keller, who she views as a threat because Simone's community programs have been too successful, too visible, and too authentic for Victoria's comfort. Another board member, Andrea Chen, head of the audit committee, leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we terminate Victoria based on this review?" "I'm suggesting we suspend her immediately pending independent investigation. And I'm suggesting we conduct a comprehensive cultural audit, revise our complaint processes, eliminate mandatory NDAs except in specific circumstances, and create accountability mechanisms that don't depend on employees trusting the very people who might be harming them." "And Miss Keller?" Gerald pressed. "You're not addressing the actual relationship." "Yes, there's a relationship." Nathaniel's voice was clear. "Simone and I developed feelings for each other. We maintained professional boundaries until this past weekend, when those boundaries were crossed off company property and outside work hours. I'm prepared to face whatever consequences the board deems appropriate for that lapse in judgment, but I will not allow that personal failing to distract from systematic problems that have existed far longer than my relationship with Simone." Thomas stood, commanding immediate attention. "I founded this company 50 years ago, built it from nothing, watched it grow, and handed it to my son because I believed he'd honor the values we started with. But growth has a way of creating blind spots. We became comfortable, complacent. We stopped asking hard questions because the answers might be inconvenient." He looked around the table. "My daughter-in-law filed a complaint that I never knew about. How many others did we miss? How many people did we fail because it was easier to write checks than change culture?" He turned to Nathaniel. "You're proposing we do this the hard way. Admit failure publicly, invite scrutiny, risk reputation and litigation. That takes courage, and it's exactly what we should have done years ago." Andrea Chen requested a 10-minute recess. Board members filed into the hallway, voices low but urgent. When they reconvened, her expression was grim. "I made calls during the break. 2 former employees confirmed they'd signed NDAs related to Victoria Stratford. 1 left the company last year. This isn't just historical, it's ongoing." Gerald Finch's face had gone pale. Thomas Cross's jaw was set with barely restrained anger. Andrea Chen nodded slowly. "I move that we suspend Victoria Stratford pending independent investigation, retain outside counsel to conduct a comprehensive review, and implement Nathaniel's proposed reforms immediately." "Seconded," Thomas said. The ET vote was unanimous. As board members filed out discussing implementation details and PR strategies, Thomas lingered. "That woman, Simone, you love her?" "Yes." "And she loves you?" "Yes." Thomas smiled. "Then don't screw it up by being noble. Charlotte tried to protect you by staying silent. Don't make the same mistake. Fight with her, not for her. Understand?" Nathaniel gripped his father's hand. "I understand." Victoria's suspension happened swiftly and without ceremony. Security escorted her from the building by noon, personal effects in a cardboard box, face rigid with barely contained rage. She didn't look at Simone when they passed in the lobby, didn't have to. The message was clear. This isn't over. But for now, it was enough. The board released a statement that afternoon, carefully worded, legally vetted, but honest about cultural shortcomings and commitment to systematic reform. The company's stock dipped briefly, then recovered when investors saw the proactive response. Simone's formal investigation was closed with a notation that while policy had been violated, no favoritism had occurred and corrective measures were being implemented. She was offered a choice: stay in community outreach with a different reporting structure or transfer to a newly created position, Director of Cultural Engagement, reporting directly to the board rather than executive leadership. She chose the latter. The day after Victoria's suspension, something shifted in the building. Conversations in hallways grew louder, freer. The basement workspace Simone had occupied was reassigned to storage. 3 women who'd left the company years ago reached out to HR, willing to speak now that Victoria was gone. Simone walked through the lobby where she'd once knelt gathering scattered papers, and Carl, the security guard, nodded with respect. The receptionist, Jessica, who'd told her to reschedule, approached hesitantly. Miss Keller, I wanted to apologize for that first day. I was following orders, but that's not an excuse. Simone studied her face, saw genuine regret. Thank you. That means something. For what it's worth, you're the first person in 5 years who made me believe this company could actually change. That night, Rochelle brought champagne to Simone's apartment, the cramped studio that would soon be just a memory, and they sat on the fire escape, watching the city. You know what the best part is? Rochelle said. You didn't just survive. You transformed the whole damn system. That's power. Simone thought about that word. Power. She'd spent years feeling powerless. One wrong move from homelessness, one missed paycheck from catastrophe. Now she had actual power. A voice people listened to, resources to create change, protection for Layla's future. But the real transformation, she realized, wasn't the title or the salary or even the victory over Victoria. It was believing she deserved all of it. 2 weeks later, Simone stood in her new office, 10th floor, windows overlooking the city, actual furniture that didn't squeak, and felt the surreal displacement of dreams manifesting. Rochelle appeared in the doorway with champagne and plastic cups. To fighting back, Rochelle toasted, and winning. We didn't win, we just survived. That's what winning looks like for people like us, survival with dignity and tact. Rochelle poured champagne. Besides, Victoria's gone, you've got an office with a door, and the CEO is openly dating you without fear of professional repercussions. I'd call that a victory. The CEO is taking a leave of absence to focus on Elena and avoid conflicts of interest while I establish my new role, Simone corrected. We're being very appropriate. Sure you are. That's why he was here at 7 a.m. helping you move boxes and looking at you like you personally invented sunshine. Simone couldn't help smiling. Okay, we're being appropriately inappropriate. Her phone buzzed. Text from Nathaniel. Dinner tonight? My place. Elena wants to show Layla her new science project. Also, I miss you. She replied, yes to all of the above. 6 months after Victoria's suspension, on a Saturday afternoon in mid-April, Simone stood in front of a conference room filled with community leaders, corporate representatives, and nonprofit directors. The first annual Community Partnership Summit, her initiative, had drawn attendees from across the Midwest. Thank you all for being here, she began, voice steady. When Cross Industries asked me to reimagine community outreach, I knew that true partnership required something corporations rarely offer: vulnerability, admitting we don't have all the answers. Listening before proposing solutions, centering community voices rather than corporate agendas. Today represents 6 months of building that kind of partnership. Imperfectly, but honestly. She walked them through the programs: youth mentorship that was actually designed by youth, small business grants that went to businesses community members identified as valuable, job training developed in partnership with residents rather than imposed from above. None of this is revolutionary, she concluded. It's just what happens when you stop treating communities as problems to be solved and start treating them as partners with expertise you lack. I'm grateful to work for a company willing to be uncomfortable enough to get it right. Applause filled the room. In the back, Nathaniel watched with undisguised pride. Elena and Layla sat beside him, coloring quietly. Inseparable now, calling each other sisters, asking when the wedding would be. Soon, they'd been told, when timing felt right, when emotions settled, when they could stand in front of family and community and claim each other without caveats or complications. After the summit, after attendees departed with new partnerships forming and Simone's business card in hand, Nathaniel found her on the rooftop garden, the same place she'd stood months ago, overwhelmed and uncertain. You were remarkable, he said, pulling her close. I was terrified. You hide it well. He kissed her temple. Elena asked again this morning, about when you'd officially be her family. Simone's chest tightened with love. What did you tell her? That I'm working on it. That some things are worth doing right rather than quickly. He pulled back enough to look at her. Simone Keller, I know this is complicated. I know we've fought hard to get here, and there are still people who question whether we're legitimate, but I need you to know something. He knelt. Simone's hands flew to her mouth. I'm not asking you to marry the CEO of Cross Industries. I'm not asking you to join a corporate dynasty or fulfill some social obligation. I'm asking if you'll marry me. The man who drives strangers around to feel human, who royally screwed up by falling for his employee, who's trying to be a good father and mostly failing but keeps trying anyway. He pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, with a stone the color of her daughter's eyes. I'm asking if you'll build a family with me, with Elena and Layla and whatever chaos comes next. Will you? Simone was crying now, couldn't stop. Yes, God, yes. He slid the ring on her finger, stood, kissed her with the kind of joy that felt like sunlight after years of shadow. Around them, the city sparkled with late afternoon light. Below, their daughters shrieked with excitement, having somehow known this was coming. We're really doing this? Simone whispered against his mouth. We really are. People will say I married you for money, for security, for... Let them say whatever they want. We know the truth. And truth is what we built this on. He touched her face with infinite tenderness. You walked into my car with nothing but hope and determination. You walked into my life and reminded me what integrity looks like. You didn't need saving. You needed a chance. I'm just grateful you took it. I'm grateful you saw me when everyone else looked through me. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the space between past pain and future promise. Then, Layla and Elena burst through the rooftop door, demanding to see the ring, planning the wedding with 6- and 8-year-old enthusiasm, talking over each other about flower girls and cake flavors. Simone watched her daughter, no longer scared or hungry, but confident and loved, and felt the full weight of transformation, not just hers but theirs. A family built not on biology or convenience, but on choice and courage and the radical act of believing that different futures were possible. That night, after celebration dinner and bedtime stories, and the girls finally asleep in Elena's room, Simone and Nathaniel sat on his back porch under stars that seemed brighter than usual. Do you ever think about that morning, Nathaniel asked, when you got in my car? Every day, how close I came to not going to that interview. How easily everything could have gone differently. I think about the choice I made to drive that day. If I'd just gone straight to the office, if I hadn't picked you up, then someone else would have. Simone laced her fingers through his. But I'm glad it was you. I'm glad you were the one who saw me before you knew my name, who defended me before you owed me anything, who loved me despite all the complications. Because of the complications, he corrected. You didn't make my life easier, Simone. You made it better. There's a difference. She leaned her head on his shoulder, felt the steady rhythm of his breathing, the solid warmth of his presence. What do we tell them when they're older and ask how we met? The truth, that their mother was the bravest person I'd ever met, that she walked into a lobby with nothing but dignity and determination and changed everything, that sometimes the wrong assumption takes you to exactly the right place, that their father was kind when he didn't have to be, that he fought when it would have been easier to let things go, that sometimes powerful people actually use their power for good. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker below. In the morning, there would be work, continuing reforms at cross industries, expanding community programs, navigating the minor scandals that came with public relationships. There would be small minds making small judgments, people who'd never understand what they'd built together. But tonight, in this moment, Simone allowed herself to simply be happy. 14 months after that first interview, on a perfect Saturday in early September, at their wedding in the very community center where Simone had held her first listening session, Layla and Elena stood as junior bridesmaids while Reverend Thompson officiated. Thomas Cross cried openly. Rochelle caught the bouquet. And when Nathaniel kissed his bride in front of neighbors who'd watched Simone struggle and colleagues who doubted her worth, the applause was deafening. And as Simone danced with her husband under string lights in the community she'd never stopped serving, she finally understood what Nathaniel had meant that morning in the elevator. Sometimes the wrong turn takes you to exactly the right place. You just have to be brave enough to keep walking.